Welcome back, brother. We're going to be discussing desexualizing your brain. And I want to go a little bit deep. I want to go beyond the surface simply because it's very easy for me to get up here and tell you, hey, you need to stop doing that. That's very easy. And I think we're old enough and mature enough to know that what actions we need to either limit and or stop altogether. So what I want us to do is I want us to paint a picture. I want us to understand exactly what an oversexualized brain is, how it starts to creep into your life slowly, then it starts to take over, and then I want to offer different perspectives and strategies that you can utilize to then help you desexualize your brain if it's a problem or if you're noticing it becoming a problem. So let's go ahead and strap in and get into it. So, what is an oversexualized brain? Well, let's talk about how it starts. How it starts is very simple. Let's say you've been doing all the right things. You have a vision for yourself. From that vision, you have goals. From those goals, you have an action plan. And from that action plan, you develop your routine. And it actually starts going really well. See, what a lot of guys do is because most of the times they don't have real actions that lead to relaxation. And so they end up saving those spots, usually for their vices or usually for the quote unquote bad habits. And the reasoning behind this, and I can completely understand the reasoning behind this, is because the majority of your time has been dedicated to positive actions, positive habits that will yield you positive results if you keep going down that path. But here's the trap that a lot of men fall for. They think that just because they're either doing it once a day at the end of the day, or maybe once a week at the end of the week, or maybe once a month at the, some type of reward, they think that that's going to stay that way. And if it did stay that way, I'm not going to lie, that might be healthy depending on, your life and your lifestyle. But I can guarantee you that a lot of us have fallen for this trap that I'm about to explain to you right now. So again, like I said, you have the vision, you have the goals, you have the action plan, you have the routine. In the routine, you start to notice that, okay, at the end of the day, after you've done everything, you're proud of yourself and you're like, oh, you know what? I need to relax. I'm going to reward myself with either a dirty movie or some type of vice. Well, it may start off that way, maybe for the first week, maybe even the first 2 weeks, but eventually what starts to happen is that there was a time slot that was dedicated for that time. Maybe it was after you've done all your priority actions. Maybe it was at the end of the day, maybe so you could fall asleep or something like that. But what ends up happening is that thirst in you, really what it is, that lust for in you starts to grow. And it's no longer can be contained at the end of the day. So the end of the day may stretch early into the next morning. And so now you're doing things that you shouldn't be doing in the morning during the time where you should have been dedicating that to the action, your routine that you had that's going to ultimately lead you to that vision. And then once you allow yourself to get away with that, one, it's a lack of discipline. And two, it's just simply understanding that you only have so much willpower in a day to dedicate to those things. And when you're fighting that urge, it's burning through that willpower. So not only have we burned through our willpower for the day, but we're also messing up our routine that's taking away from the dedicated actions that's going to lead to the vision. So notice how it start off really small. It's like, you know what, I'm just going to do it every here and everything's going to be okay because I have everything under control. Well, that sounds good until things start to get out of control. And now it's spilling into your day. What used to be a 15-minute action turned into a 30-minute action. The 30-minute action turned into an hour action. The hour turned into three turned into seven turned into, yeah. And again, I've read stories where guys are wasting their entire day simply doing this thing. And again, it takes over your life. It really ruins it because not only has it started off by spilling out the life force, but it's also been stealing the necessary energy that you were using to dedicate that to your health, to dedicate that to your money or your career, your investments, dedicating to your relationships, dedicating to your overall purpose. It starts to steal that away from you. And the very easiest way to break somebody's routine, the easiest way to break somebody's routine is by simply disrupting their sleep. One of the most powerful things that you can do if you're trying to start your journey is simply go to bed and wake up at the same time every day. Now, again, it might be a little bit different. When I start to go to sleep at the same time every day, I don't wake up at the same time every day. Sometimes I start waking up a little bit earlier and earlier just because, the amount of recovery that I need has already been through. And so my body's getting used to it and the process is getting faster and faster. However, That's not the point. The point is, once I'm able to disrupt your sleep schedule, now it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you have to go to bed and you don't want to go to bed because you're trying to fuel yourself with more dopamine. And that's something that's going to lead me to my next topic that I think is extremely important is a lot of guys think that they're doing this thing, and you guys know what I'm talking about, choking the chicken, spanking the wood, whatever it is you want to call it. They think they're doing this thing because their body is like, oh, I'm fiending for that. But that's not the truth at all. And in fact, the real truth of the matter is it's your mind that's addicted to it. And that's where it starts to shift. This is the first perspective change that I want to give you is yes, you might be hormonal and yes, your body may have play a role into it, but you have to understand this is a chemical process that is going on. Every time that you sit down and you're doing these things, you are feeding yourself a rush of dopamine, a rush of serotonin. Not only that, but if you're prolonging it, meaning that it's not a 15-minute session or a 30-minute session, and you're doing this for 4, 6, 7 hours, what you're doing is simply just dripping yourself with this long lasting dopamine and serotonin. Why is that a problem? Because first of all, you didn't earn that dopamine or serotonin. When you start to study the brain, you realize that the dopamine and serotonin is released when you start doing positive things for your body, whether that's you go out and you seek food and your body rewards you for that. It's like, yeah, that's a good thing. It wants you to survive. When you drink water, it wants you to survive. After you're exercising, again, it wants you to survive. These are the things where it starts to drip. But if and again, that's a finite resource. This is not something that is infinite in your brain. This is a finite resource. And so when you're sitting here doing this thing for 30 minutes, 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, what happens is you're dripping and depleting those reserves of dopamine and serotonin. So, well, guess what happens? Now, if you're able to quote unquote break out of it, you have the first major resistance that stops people from achieving the action of doing the action, which is the start. How many of us understand intellectually that doing the actual action isn't even that hard, and we know that once we're in the moment of doing the action, that the emotions start to turn around and we start to feel good about doing the action. But yet, how many of us has stopped right before that part of taking action simply because the resistance feels so hard to break through to start? Well, yeah, that not only is that easy to break when you're on a streak, or it's easy to break when you haven't had any dopamine, but when you've been fed, when you've been quote unquote rewarded, which is a pseudo reward, a false reward, if you've been falsely rewarded, well, you're going to feel no reason. Why would I want to get out of this feeling and go out and suffer or go out and do this negative thing, right? Especially when you're done with the negative thing, it doesn't hit as hard as it did if you weren't doing those vices, right? The same thing for weed, alcohol, pleasuring yourself. All these things are giant dopamine, serotonin spikes. And so nothing of regular substance, nothing of getting up early at the right time, eating macro friendly foods, exercising, talking to women, doing your work. None of these things, these are all little dopamine spikes. These are all little things that during the day, that way it keeps a constant flow and you feel good, slightly above the baseline. When you're doing things like pleasuring yourself, or you're doing things like smoking or drinking, what's doing is it's having you be used to a super elevated state of happiness. And so when you don't get that elevated state of happiness, you actually feel worse because you're not used to what normal actually feels like. And normal is just above baseline. If you're used to operating at 10 out of 10, when you're operating at 7 out of 10, you're going to feel like you've downgraded, when in reality 7 out of 10 is the baseline. You get what I'm saying? So again, that's the first thing. So not only does it start off small like that, but then it starts to grow, and it starts to take over those habits. Then once it starts to take over its habits, now what happens to a lot of guys is they're so trapped in this chemical warfare with their brain, because the brain is saying like, why would I go work out? Why would I go do something that's hard? Why would I go something that's difficult? Why would I do something with a chance of failure when I have instant gratification for long term, quote unquote, long term success of sitting in my room, playing video games, watching dirty movies? It's this cycle. And so whenever guys are like, you know what, I know I need to change. I know I need to do these things. I know I need to have a vision for myself. Now, not only are you fighting against the lower version of yourself, but you're basically fighting against the lower version of yourself and your corn addicted brain. Really what it is your dopamine and serotonin at a heightened leveled brain. You're fighting that. That's why a lot of guys will come in here and say, oh yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to do that. But then the next day, guess what happens? They spiral right back into it. Why? Because your body and your brain works on a rhythm. If it's used to operating at a certain level, guess what's going to happen the next day? It's going to want to operate at a certain level. Guess what happens when you switch from eating processed foods, all this high fat, high sugar, high carb foods, and you start eating healthier foods like a salad? Guess who's not going to like that? Your brain. And so now you have not only, again, this just shows you how difficult this is. A lot of guys think it's simply like they simply think they're just fighting themselves and that their willpower burned out. No, you're fighting an entire system. Think of it like this. Think about it like you have a giant bucket in front of you, right? It's a big bucket, and you have a giant stick. You take that giant stick and you start swirling it in a circle, okay? You're swirling it, you're swirling it, you're swirling it. And so again, every time you're swirling it, what is happening is that's you doing indulging your vices. That's you skipping the hard stuff. That's you watching the movies when you should be doing something else. That's you watching corn instead of talking to real women. That's you eating Cheetos, Fritos, Doritos, bacon triple cheeseburgers dipped in chocolate. You know that's my favorite. My favorite thing. Triple double cheeseburger dipped in chocolate with a side of bacon, right? That's you turning it and turning and turning it. And when you're like, you know what? I'm going to turn my life around. Turning your life around is literally turning your life around. So you have to turn the other way. Well, guess what happens if you ever done this in a pool or something? What happens? Now you're met with this force that's pushing you in the opposite direction. And the hardest part is withstanding all of that force and then turning and then keeping it turned in the opposite direction. This is the real reason why a lot of guys get caught up. This is the real reason why it's so difficult. And the farther gone you are, the harder it is. Because again, it's the stronger the current, the stronger the current, the stronger the current. And so when you like, you know what, I'm gonna make a decision. You make that decision, you wake up the next morning, guess what happens? You get smacked with that current. Once you get smacked with that current, a lot of people really start to beat themselves up. And guess what? That negative cycle starts them right back into the negative things that they were doing, which guess what again? Makes that cycle stronger. You understand what I'm saying? So a lot of guys really get caught up in that. So when it comes to an oversexualized brain, it's simply the feeding yourself the habits that are sexualizing your brain, that's feeding yourself that dopamine and that serotonin. I remember when I was trying to break this cycle, going on my long streaks. I remember when I would have a good week or a good 2 weeks on my diet, and I would say, you know, it's a good time. Let me go ahead and eat a pizza. Well, I'd eat a pizza, and then guess what? I'd have these crazy urges. Excuse me. Why would I have these crazy urges? Well, the reason why I'm having these crazy urges is because there are old patterns that existed to where as soon as I would get a pizza, then I would watch a Netflix or something, and then guess what? Back to the dirty stuff. And once you've ingrained that into your system for so long, because again, we're creatures of habits. Humans are creatures of habits. Once you've ingrained something in so long, guess what happens in your brain? Your brain starts to connect neurons together, and then it starts to build a fatty acid around it. That way, the electricity that runs through them gets faster. Not only does that not form overnight, but you can't get rid of that overnight. And so, whenever you start to go backwards, because you think you're giving yourself a reward or you're giving yourself a break, what you're really doing is you're strengthening that neuron connection in your brain that's telling you like, hey, let's go ahead and get this done, because that's going to trigger so many other different things. It's like, okay, I've been here before. I know that I'm about to eat pizza. Let me go ahead and start salivating my glands. Let me go ahead and start depositing the serotonin, because I know I'm going to get that from the fatty, melty cheese and the grease that's going to enter my stomach. You get what I'm saying? This is why when you compare, and this is a no-brainer, when you're comparing diets, it's like, brother, chocolate, depending on what your weaknesses are, chocolate, burgers, pizza, tacos, freaking mozzarella sticks, bro, all that sounds awesome. All that sounds amazing, right? But if I say, hey, man, chicken, rice, broccoli, asparagus, whatever, you're like, man, that doesn't, I don't, like, it's like, we know it's good, but I'm not trying to, you know what I mean? And you know why? Because again, when you eat the chicken, rice, broccoli, or whatever, when you eat the healthy foods, it's going to operate at a 7 as far as your serotonin and your dopamine, because it's not only going to make your body feel good, but then your brain's going to reward you for that. But when you're eating those fatty food, high fat, high carbs, high sugar, guess what happens? It goes from that 7 to a 9 or a 10. This is why we call it instant gratification. And instant gratification is going to help you in the short term, but it's going to destroy you in the long term. Look at this picture on the screen. The picture on the screen is exactly what happens. On the left side, you got the person who has a poor diet, not exercising, and is probably watching dirty movies on that laptop. And again, this is all great in the moment, but look at the long-term effects that it has on this person. And some of you are living these long-term effects right now, or you've lived these long-term effects in the past. Well, guess what happens when we start to switch over to the other side? We start to manage. We start to have more discipline. Instead of eating 2 cheeseburgers, we're eating one cheeseburger. Instead of having triple cheese, we have just one patty. You get what I'm saying? When we start to eat more healthy, when we start to go for daily cardio, it starts to show on the body. This is not hard concepts to understand, but if you understand where it's coming from, you understand how hard it is. Now, if you're a person that you're really deep into the spiral, like you've tried and tried and tried and tried and tried and nothing's happening, you have to reach out for help, because there's a completely, and again, I've studied this. You guys know I'm certified in behavior change. When a person is held accountable by another person, they completely flip. It's a 95% chance they're going to flip. And I don't know if you guys have ever taken stats, but 95 is a huge percentage. It flips because, again, not only do you feel like you're failing yourself, but you're also failing other people. And a lot of people don't like that feeling. And for the people who are on the right side, you understand that that same logic still applies. Just because you're doing everything right doesn't mean you're operating at the highest efficiency that you would like to. You know as well as I know that there is a completely different level in you that you need to get to in order to get to the things that you need. And if you haven't, that means you haven't been around other people who are like-minded as you, who are on a different level. I remember when I was into this content game, I'm like, yeah, I'm doing great. I'm uploading 1 video a day. I'm doing great. And then I look at somebody else's channel, I won't even say I look up to, but I respect their hustle. And not only they're dropping 3 videos a day, they're dropping 3 shorts a day. They're doing all, and I'm thinking, dang, right? That's what happens when you start to get around winners. You start to realize like, dang, I could be doing more. Because yes, what I'm doing is great, but can I be doing more? And the answer is always yes. And so just because you've beaten your old self and you're not really indulging in a bunch of degeneracy doesn't mean that you're not operating at the highest version possible. Stop comparing yourself to the loser version of yourself and start comparing yourself to the better winner version of yourself. That didn't make sense, but you guys get what I'm saying. Compare yourself to your higher version, not your lower version. Because when you compare yourself to your higher version, you understand that you have work to do. And trust me when I say, and again, it's not even trust me when I say, go look at the science. A person in a community, it works harder, smarter, more efficient, simply because you have more people working on it at the same time. And so that's why I'm going to be opening this group up soon. And again, I'm getting you guys ready for it, prepared for it. Start saving up some cash. Start doing what you got to do. Start getting your funds in order, because once this thing opens up, it's going to be a complete game changer. I've done this twice already. The first time worked really well. It wasn't long enough. It was only 3 months. I was like, okay, let me just do 3 months. I did 3 months and I realized like, oh man, people are getting results, but I want to make sure they're getting long-term results. So the next group, guess what? I did it for a year. Same process. People were getting exponential results in that. And it was something that I'm extremely proud of and I'm still proud of. But then guess what happened at the end of the year? We all had to disband. And now I'm sitting here thinking about like, damn, I kind of miss these guys. And so this next one, I want it to be a lifetime thing. I want it to be a pay once. Once you pay once, you're in it for life. And now you have a network or group of guys that you can always rely on that's going to push you to be a better version of yourself. Not only can you push them, but it's going to offer you a great network. So anyway, so about desexualizing your brain, just to recap, an oversexualized brain is you keep feeding it this nonsense. You're feeding it soft core. You're feeding it hardcore. You're feeding it all these dirty thoughts. You're allowing these dirty thoughts to be in your mind. You're consuming these dirty thoughts, whether it's through media, whether it's through written form, whether it's through audio form, you're consuming it. In order to desexualize your brain, you simply have to do the complete opposite. Whenever you see something, like for me on Instagram, if I see somebody who's cosplaying or if I see some big booty Latino or whatever, I'm hitting not interested. Even if I slightly am interested in it, I know that long-term consumption of this is not going to help me. Not interested. If I look at somebody and I see them, I look at a girl and I'm thinking of sexual thoughts, I immediately start to check myself, because that I know long term consumption of that is not going to help. And take it from somebody who used to have an over sexualized brain, who is a lot more in control of his mind. Once you're able to make those transitions, your life is going to completely change. Not only for the actions that you have that you're taking on a daily basis, but the thoughts that you have as well. And I'll give you guys this one gem for free before I leave you guys. So one of the things that I was having difficulty with was over sexualizing women, because in my mind, the only value that the woman could give to me was her sexuality. And I remember that when I started switching from just talking to short term relationships to going after long term relationships, I told myself, okay, my first and primary goal is not to sleep with this woman. My first and primary goal is to understand her character, understand her values, understand, the deeper parts of somebody. And once I made that switch, once I switched and I stopped focusing on the sexual part, I started looking for women who they really are, which, spoiler alert, 85% of them only rely on sex. But then I realized, like, oh, okay, a lot of you guys are not even, like, it turns me off when I talking to a woman and she has nothing of substance, or nothing of value. And trust me when I say that is a complete game changer, because now when when a woman is trying to utilize sex against you, it won't work, because for one, you don't want it without knowing her character or her values, and two, you automatically know who the type of woman that she is, that she's willing to use that as some sort of weapon to try to get something out of you. It works on so many different ways. So I suggest you guys adopt that if you haven't already. Anyway, like the video if you like the video. Check the description for the certain resources that I have out for you that could potentially help you. Leave a comment if you made it this far, and if you made it this far, again, I want to highlight the OGs. I see you guys coming out. You're showing support. I love that. So if you made it to the end, type in desexualized, and with that, guys, I'll see y'all in the next one. All right, peace out.